Mary Hunt at Water. We're here with Diane New, who's the other co-director. We're going to go ahead and get started. Other people will be joining us. You know, we always get, as in this case, we have 35 people signed up, and of course, a lot of them can't make the lunch hour, but they will watch the video as soon as it's available. So we never worry about that. We're just happy that those who are here are able to make the time, because I do think there's something special about being in person together with not only with our esteemed speaker today, Dr. Shawn Copeland, but also with each other, especially in these troubled times. So a warm good afternoon from us at Water, and a warm welcome, and hope that this Black History Month will be a time when increased energies and focuses will be on the important contributions of African American people in this country and around the world, African people around the world. I want to welcome Dr. M. Shawn Copeland, who graces our screen today to talk about the second edition of her very important book, Enfleshing Freedom, Body, Race, and Being, published by Fortress Press in 2023. And I assured Shawn that I would be shamelessly hawking this during the hour, because this is one of my highest recommendations for a book. If you want to sit down and especially grow in your own understanding of these issues, but more importantly, be in dialogue and discussion with people, whether in your classroom or in your congregation or in your community. This book is really a jumping off point that will, I think, take you a long ways in that journey. We at Water begin our programs with a land acknowledgement. We've incorporated this into our programs to remind ourselves of why we do what we do, and what we need to do more of, given the systemic injustice Indigenous and other people of color face in this country. A land acknowledgement is a beginning, not an end, a time to reflect on our history and to commit again to justice making. Water is on Indigenous land in Silver Spring, Maryland, the traditional and contemporary land of the Piscataway and Anacostan peoples. We acknowledge the trauma and injustice toward Indigenous people and other people of color that is deep in American culture and history. We join in efforts to eradicate it and to make reparations for the genocide involved. Water's work, whether intellectual, spiritual, or liturgical, is aimed to bring about social justice, using the resources from feminist and womanist theology. Consider for a collective quiet moment then the native people on whose land you sit, or those who came here enslaved. Feel free to put their names in the chat if you wish. This is an opportunity simply to collect ourselves and to give them their due, our gratitude. We can also take a moment to acknowledge where we find ourselves in the U.S. today, fraught with authoritarian actions against innocent people, rife with killings of civilians by government workers. Water's work brings feminist and womanist spiritual values and intellectual work to efforts for social change. And our hope is that by socializing resources like this book today, we spread tools and energy for justice. In light of these recent actions and the many more against immigrants, people of color, queer people, those who are poor, pregnant persons, and so many others, it is crucial, and more crucial than ever, that we create opportunities like this for learning, conversation, and resistance. You can be sure that Water will protect these spaces and expand them in the months to come what may. Feel free to join us to suggest topics or speakers, books we might fruitfully explore. The stakes are rising. The time is now. I will now introduce our speaker, Dr. M. Shawn Copeland, and her book, Enfleshing Freedom, Body, Race, and Being, which is now in a second edition. Then she will explore her work with us for 20 or 25 minutes, and then the floor will be open for questions and discussion until the top of the hour, which will be 2 p.m. Eastern Time, when we will close officially. The Zoom will remain open after that for conversation as long as people wish. But we like to make a covenant that we will finish at the top of the hour so those who can leave can do so gracefully. Please listen and enjoy. We will take notes. Shawn might even have some notes to share, which will be on our website shortly, along with the video of this session. You can access it by going to Water's website at www.waterwomensalliance.org. Look under Programs and Teleconferences with today's date and Shawn's name, And feel free to rewatch this, to share it with others. We'll send you the notes and the link to the video in the next week or so, but use this material. This is why we produce it, is for your use, for sharing, to make change. So with that as a brief introduction from Water, I am delighted to welcome you, Dr. Shawn Copeland, to Water. Shawn Copeland is Professor Emerita of Systematic Theology from the Department of Theology and the Program in African and African Diaspora Studies at Boston College. We've known each other over the long years in Catholic theological and especially in feminist and womanist circles in religion. I hate to say how many years we've known.
Yeah, really.
I mean, really, we would. I think we met in childcare. I think that's probably the easiest way to say it.
Exactly.
But it's an honor to have you talk with us today on this very important book, Enfleshing Freedom, Body, Race, and Being. Dr. Copeland, who is new to some of you, received the PhD in Systematic Theology from Boston College, where she wrote a dissertation focused on the Canadian Jesuit theologian and philosopher Bernard Lonergan. She looked at his idea of the human good. She taught theology for more than 35 years with stints at St. Norbert College, Yale Divinity School, Marquette University, and for the 17 years before her retirement, she taught at Boston College. Her contributions to theological anthropology and political theology, as well as to African and African American intellectual history and religious experience, have been deeply appreciated in the field, especially by her colleagues at Boston College. One of them, Assistant Professor of Theology and African Diaspora Studies, Program Professor Amy Victoria Adkins Jones, put it this way, and I quote, "Copeland's voice is one that doesn't tire, fighting to show those who say they love God how they have failed to love their neighbor. Theologizing from the treatment of Black women's bodies historically through chattel slavery to the present, Shawn raised the alarm for the church at large and for the Catholic Church in particular, that failing to address theologically the questions of race and gender and poverty and oppression was a failure to serve God rightly." End of quote. I concur. Dr. Copeland has written more than 125 articles and chapters. Her books include Knowing Christ Crucified, The Witness of African American Religious Experience in 2018, and The Subversive Power of Love, The Vision of Henrietta DeLille in 2009. Shawn is the consummate teacher. The Catholic Theological Society of America gave her their highest honor, the John Courtney Murray Award. The Black Religious Scholars of the American Academy of Religion gave her their Distinguished Scholars Award. The Black Religious Scholars Group named her a womanist legend. All of this is to say that we are in the presence of a great theologian and a great teacher. Today we have the privilege of a discussion with her of her signal volume, Enfleshing Freedom, Body, Race, and Being, now in its second edition. We at Water publish lists with short commentaries on our website of what we call What We're Reading. On the first edition of Enfleshing Freedom, we wrote, and I quote, "M. Shawn Copeland ties the suffering that African American women have endured with the suffering Christ experienced through historical research, as well as references to postmodern racism, discrimination, sexism, bodily abuse, and the lasting effects of colonialism." Copeland writes, "If the cries of the victims are the voice of God, then the faces of the victims are the face of God. The bodies of the victims are the body of God." Readers will find the book illuminating as a womanist theological way to enflesh freedom. That was what we wrote when the book came out in its first edition. And now for the second edition, we wrote, "This signal volume has been updated from the 2009 version to a new, significantly changed edition that is well worth reading. The updates are generally painful, especially the lynching of Black women, but that history needs reporting. The result is a fresh book that invites serious and sustained study as a resource for justice making." That was Water's second comment on the second edition. And I would note today that not many books in today's market go into a second edition. But from 2009, when the first edition appeared, to 2023, when the second edition appeared, and now to 2026, the importance and urgency of this book have only increased. I turn the word over now to Dr. Shawn Copeland with respect, with thanks, and with delight. Shawn?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hunt. and I accept with respect and delight. I appreciate your invitation to do this, and I really am grateful to those of you who are taking time out of a busy day, because we all have busy days, to join us this afternoon and to enter into this conversation. I have a few remarks. I'm going to rely a bit on the preface of this book, but I'd like to provide a kind of context for it in this way that the first edition aimed for uh, a real treatment of theological anthropology. Just to say this quickly before I begin something more prepared, but it was also at a time when I myself was trying to work out how I wanted to do political theology. What did that mean? And so in the 9 years, I guess, from 2010 to 2015, that's real. I mean, 2015, this time is really, things have changed dramatically for all of us, and particularly in the United States. But I don't want to signal our suffering as more egregious than that of any others, because God's human creatures have been suffering from time immemorial. And we are getting a taste of something that we just haven't done. And yet, as Heather Cox Richardson says in her blog, really, history rhymes. It doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And I think there's a lot rhyming right now. There's a lot rhyming, and it has been. It has been. So let me just make some prepared remarks here and then see if we can open up for any conversation that you might have, anything that my comments might spark. If you've had a chance to take a look at this book, that's fine. I'm grateful. And it has a second edition also because so many people wrote to me after the first edition. I'm really grateful to people who taught all so many different seminaries in so many different places around the country. Wrote to me. Students wrote, and I try really to respond to students because in some ways that's really how you spark people's interest in a discipline. And it's always surprising when students write. They always have such honest questions and such real ones, such real questions for them. So that's part of why there's a second edition, because some issues really enlarged from 2009, 10 to 2023. I mean, so many things have changed. So here are my two quotes. The first is from Sven Lindqvist in his Exterminate the Brutes. The book is entitled, the subtitle is One Man's Odyssey into the Heart of Darkness and the Origins of European Genocide. It was published in 1992. But he writes there, it is not knowledge we lack. What is missing is the courage to understand what we know and to draw conclusions. It's not knowledge we lack. What is missing is the courage to understand what we know and to draw conclusions. And the second quote is from a young African-American activist who was arrested at the Ferguson rally in 2014. And she said in 2019, this, our demand is simple, stop killing us. This came, of course, after a series of notorious murders of young Black men by police or their agents, all extrajudicial killing. We missed, part of why there's a second edition is that we missed the killing, the extrajudicial killings of young Black women or old Black women. We missed that. So let me move into my remarks, and then I hope to say some more, because Minneapolis in 2020 is also Minneapolis in 2025. And Minneapolis in 2025-26 is also Minneapolis in 2020. This is the same long stretch. It's the same long stretch. So Enfleshing Freedom is an exercise in theology as political, and it tries to meet the demands of systematic theology in wrestling with concrete historical, cultural, religious, social, and existential circumstances that are riddled with sin and irrationality. This second edition takes into account the impacts of the devastating global imperium with its cruel reproduction of abused, impoverished, depleted children, women, and men who have been made migrants. They've made people migrants. Depleted children, women, and men who've been made migrants. The unspeakable, reprehensible neo-lynchings of Black and brown children, youth, women, and men, and the ongoing vicious depredation of the least Black female human person. This least of the least, we're back to Matthew 25:45. Jesus tells us that if we haven't done it for the least of his brothers and sisters, we haven't done it for him, because he's there and they're present. So let me just say quickly what kind of theological genre this is, and then say a little bit about the question I'm struggling with, and then look at, again, what's changed in the book. So if you've read the first edition, what's changed? And you're thinking, well, I don't need to, and you may not need to, but if you want to read the second edition, I can tell you what's changed. So first of all, theological genre. We all know that theology is an academic discipline, but it makes a claim on us that no other academic discipline can dare to entertain. Because of its intimate, if edgy relationship to Christian tradition, belief, and practice, theology seeks to understand and to interpret, to impart the Word of God and its meanings in various historical, cultural, and social. Here, thinking of social in this comprehensive way of political, economic, and technological context. When theology intentionally commits its intellectual practice to the service of the poor and marginalized, when it interrogates history, culture, and society in remembrance of the crucified Christ, when it critiques the moral and ethical values of the society within which it functions, when it unmasks all theories and theologies that covertly or overtly prop up whatever ideologies that threaten to destroy God's creation, and when it contests any reduction of reality, of truth, or meaning, then that theology is resolutely political. So Enfleshing Freedom is a political theology in the U.S. context. It holds itself really accountable to the dangerous memory of chattel slavery with its erotic violence and soul murder, even as the bodies of the indigenous peoples pile up before our door. Our historical and cultural amnesia are deep and protracted. They have produced that thick crusted layer of moral, cultural, and social racism that James Cone has named America's original sin. Enfleshing Freedom also ought to be read as a womanist theology. And so to think of Katie Cannon's definition, I'm thinking of a theology that disentangles or differentiates Black women's bodily and social experience from that of Black men and non-Black women and men, that uncovers sexism and homophobia in the Black community, and that illustrates, to use a phrase from Emily Towns, the cultural production of evil. In other words, we reproduce evil in our culture. We produce it. It just doesn't drop down from somewhere or spur up from somewhere, if you like those spatial metaphors. At the same time, this theology resonates with contemporary theological treatments of trauma This is something that we've really begun to think about seriously in theology in the last 10 years or so as well. Trauma. Excuse me. A leading voice in this field is, of course, Shelley Rambo, who is here at Boston University, which is down the street from us on Commonwealth, the other end of Commonwealth Avenue. We're at one end, they're at the other. Enfleshing Freedom also contributes to body theology. Black women have been socially and culturally constructed by the dominant culture as a marginated being. Someone living, breathing, bleeding, struggling, thinking, hoping, and loving on the margin. Enfleshing Freedom, I should hope, is also recognizable as a Catholic theology. And as much as we insist on the Imago Dei, and if we think, I did this for my parish, where I work as a kind of theologian in residence. And my pay is just goodwill, huh? That's all it is. And I wrote a little blurb for our our bulletin on DEI, which, of course, as we know, if you think back to your Latin class, Dei, of God, diversity, equity, inclusion. You can't be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive than God, the triune God. Diverse, all persons are equal, and all persons are included, but all persons are distinct. So here, in Enfleshing Freedom, then, the fundamental question for me was to try to relate theology, this experience of the theology to the experience of social suffering. And social suffering, another excellent book in this genre is by Dr. Nancy Pineda Madrid on suffering in Ciudad Juarez, which really deals with the murder of Latin American women, Mexican women on the other side of the El Paso border. And we've forgotten that. It's been we forget things because so much of our news floods us, but then we forget it. And it's the way of the 21st century. It's the way of the 21st century. Because we have it in print, somehow accessible, we think we don't have to remember. But in fact, we do, and we desperately need to remember. But this genre of social suffering, for me, social suffering really is a way to refer to oppressions that create injustice. That is, we create them. We spawn these oppressions. It's oppression that's made to afflict human persons in particular social arrangements. It's the massive, as really was once described by William Jones as massive, maldistributed, negative, enormous, and transgenerational social suffering. It's passed on. It doesn't stop. It just keeps on going, which means then we have to teach young people what it means to despise, what it means to disregard, to hold others in contempt, because it's passed on from generation to generation. That sense of entitlement to oppress others, and others are oppressed in the next generation. So the other point I want to make is that this book holds memory in utmost seriousness. Columbia University Saidiya Hartman rightly observed that memory never simply can be an inventory of what went before. It's not just remembering what went before. In some ways, it's really that kind of rhyme of history, that we're repeating something, not because of some necessity for repetition, but because in some ways we can't recognize what's happening in front of us. This book is also, we could say, concerned about the doctrine of theological anthropology. And in this way, it tries to say that here theological anthropology really has to take into account the body as a site and mediation of divine revelation, that the body shapes human existence as relational and social, that the creativity of the triune God is manifest in differences of gender, race, sexuality. On this point of sexuality, someone sent me an email I was having a conversation with them on the phone, and they sent me an article they had been reading that the Talmud has at least 7 ways of thinking of gender. It's not some rigid, simple either or, either this or that. But the Talmud takes into account a way of speaking about gender in 7 different ways. I'll include the reference in the notes so that if you're interested, you can look at it. So that there's creativity that's manifest. Divine creativity is manifest in differences of gender, race, and sexuality. That solidarity is a set of body practices. It's something that we physically do, and you can see that really. You think about Minnesota. These are bodily practices. In 21 degrees, people are out there, blowing their whistles, filming. That solidarity, that's neighborliness. That's neighborliness. And that Eucharist orders and transforms our bodies as the body of Christ. So by privileging the Black woman's body, we make these claims specific and particular, rather than exclude or replace or diminish other body persons. But specificity and particularity insists that we are all persons, all subjects. Not just some people, but all of us. Now, let me say something about the changes in this book. And again, I'm relying a little bit on the preface here. But what I tried to do is to show the reader, particularly someone who read this before, that writers go on to learn. You don't just stop because you've written something. You continue to learn. Sometimes you can put that into press in something new, but you might just want to scoop and think about these same issues again in an updated edition. So this new edition expands the discussion in the first chapter of the abuse of the South African kosher woman, Sarah Bartman, not only to unmask more critically the European colonial context in which, and the male persons, Black and white, who manipulated her body and assaulted her dignity, but to really learn from the new scholarship coming from South African and diasporic women, because there's a lot that's been written about Sarah Bartman in the 9 years or so that between these two books, two editions. In the fourth chapter, this grew out of the necessity to take into account what's happening in what Hart and Negri, just riffing, if you will, off of their work, the new sovereign disorder or the new empire as globalization. That's what's happened. So we're trafficking. What we're learning from the Epstein scandal, of course, is that we can traffic everything. We can traffic anything. We can traffic anyone. Not just enslaved Africans, but we can traffic your 9-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed sister. We can traffic anyone. Chapter 6 looks at 2 contemporary movements, and that's Say Her Name and Black Lives Matter. I read these 2 movements as really prophetic. And we don't pay attention, we didn't at the time that Black Lives Matter emerged. We forgot that Black Lives Matter was really founded by really transgender women. That it really had a handle on what was happening to Black people's lives. It grew out of a love letter that someone wrote to Black people that got published and then got shared all over the place. So these two movements continue freedom's struggle to protect and honor the bodies and lives and dignity of Black human persons. At the same time, that chapter takes seriously Black women's resistance to sexual assault during the slave trade and their marginalization in Black movements for freedom, civil rights, and social justice. This is something that we don't always like to admit, but it's really true, that Black women were marginalized in some of these most important movements. We suddenly know now that it's Mahalia Jackson who encourages Martin Luther King Jr. to talk about a dream, We didn't hear that for the longest time. We didn't hear it. At the same time, we're looking at in this particular chapter, the names. We know the names of Black men; they're resonant with us. We can just name them. We can talk about Michael Brown. We can't miss George Floyd. We have these names that are there, but we don't know the Black women. We know Sandra Bland. We know that name, but it's important for us to pay attention, and so we try to lift these up. The last chapter expands the treatment of the cross and the lynching tree, and I use Angela Sims' nomenclature of neo-lynching to bring the lynchings of Black women really to the forefront of our discussion. We could say that in the cultural matrix, that is the United States, everything has changed since 1619, and nothing has changed. We are still abusing people. We are still squandering land. We are still attempting to grab land. Maybe you're not some of you may be, and some of you may not be Super Bowl fans, but the whole impact of Bad Bunny's celebration of Puerto Rico was to remind us that Puerto Rico is America. And Heather Cox Richardson did a marvelous blog post on Puerto Rico and its angular relationship to the United States. That's why history needs to be so important to a country like ours, because all the people who are elements in our story are still here. That's our problem. The Vandals and the Visigoths are gone in Europe. They've all been amalgamated into some other people. But in the United States, the indigenous people are still here. The descendants of the enslaved people are still here. You can't get rid of them. When you look at it, what we've done with land in terms of claiming Puerto Rico as a territory, holding on to it, and then in the midst of Hurricane Maria, for our chief executive not to know that Puerto Rico was part of the United States tells us something about what we think of history. We think the present is all that's important. And it isn't, because we are living in the present. We are living in the future that our past created. This is the problem for us. We can't get rid of the indigenous people, the descendants of the enslaved people. We can't get rid of women who've suffered here, who've been abused here, who've been trafficked here, who've been made into domestic servants here. All these people, we're all still here. And it'll take another 250 years for us to kind of forget about what happened to us. It's still too fresh. That's the shocking thing here. It's all still fresh. And we underscore and reinscribe that history when we interact with one another in evil and vicious ways. Everything has changed and nothing has changed. Ours is a time of continuing struggle. Ours is a time that needs to embrace accountability, that needs to be responsible for our judgments and our actions. Ours is a time that's desperate for personal integrity or authenticity. Ours is a time not for death dealing, but for life infusing, life making. As a Christian theologian, I really pursue my craft in faith and a knowledge born of love. I believe that evil shall never have the final word. I say I hang on to hope with my fingernails, which keep getting shorter every time. But I really seek out a higher perspective. Golgotha is the place of our redemption. There's a perspective there that sees us in a kind of telescopic, panoramic way. The absolute transcendent solution to the cultural production of evil can be found only in the darkly luminous mystery of the life, death, and resurrection of the Jewish Jesus of Nazareth. This solution is anticipated in the concrete grace practice of Christian communities, yet it is and shall remain even until the last day the gracious, mysterious, eschatological gift of a merciful, provident, and just God. We're not going to create heaven on earth. It's just not. It won't work. It won't work. We have to get ready, though, for the coming of the kingdom of God, the coming of the reign of God, as Maria Sassi so poignantly said, the kingdom of God. We are all kin in some way. We are all kin. And until we recognize this, we're going to be living in a dreadful, sinful situation. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop. But I guess I want to say that we really need to figure out how to live together. You know, it's Martin Luther King who says, Jr., who says, we'll either live together as brothers and sisters, but perish together as fools. That's where we are right now, I think. Anyway, so I'm going to stop. It's about 1:37, and we have like a good 20 minutes or so, I guess, for questions and answers or comments. I'm really interested in people's comments too. So,
Thank you so very much, Shawn. Uh, nothing less than I expected. And the reason for my enthusiasm, both about your longtime work and also particularly about this book, Enfleshing Freedom. I think this is uh, spot on for what we need to be talking about today. This is not historical theology, it is political theology in the everyday, and that is critically important. Um, made even more so because it comes from a deeply grounded, faith-based womanist perspective that is the kind of voice that we need to be hearing. And we're seeing that we're seeing and hearing that among other colleagues. This has been a time, I think, when, at least in the US, some religious leaders have stepped up in ways that are exemplary and that remind us of what has gone on, not only in the civil rights movement, but in other Vietnam War,
the American Indian movement, I
American
mean,
Indian movement.
AIM, yes,
The,
yes,
the the Buddhist the Buddhist monks arrived
yes,
today in
yes,
Washington. The
yes,
19 Buddhist monks walked to Washington and from Texas, and they arrived yesterday. Today they're having a
yes.
special event at the Capitol Peace Memorial, and they will be going tomorrow to finish their walk, going to the capital of Maryland, to Annapolis. And so they will be taking themselves out of here tomorrow. But yesterday was a brilliant service uh, of welcome, and also um, the Bishop of Washington, Mary Ann Buddy, received them in a very gracious way at the National Cathedral. So this is a time when women in, yes, Betty Powell, also ordained among the early women in that church, raises her hands in salute here on our
Yes.
screen. So I can't thank you enough, Shawn. I know I speak for others here, and what we want to hear is more from you. Um, This is a book, as I said earlier, for those who might not have been here, to use for a class or for a study group or simply for your own personal education. It is material that is accessible. It is deeply grounded, but it is very easy to read, except for what I'm going to talk about in my own question about chapter 7, which is enormously difficult to read, not because it's not written in the same fluid prose, but because it is so painful. We are in your debt for a clear map this afternoon through these complexities, and now I open the floor for discussion. Please use the chat function at the bottom, the react function at the bottom, and use the raise hand button as I have just done, which moves me to the top of the queue, and then we'll recognize people as they raise their hands for questions, comments, and other suggestions. So with that, and with deep thanks to you, Shawn, for something that has just, I think, hit the nail on the head today, but also propelled us with new insight and enthusiasm for the work ahead, and God only knows how difficult it will be. So the floor is open. We will finish our discussion just a moment or so before 2 o'clock with some announcements, and then we'll continue if there's more conversation to be had, which we can do for a little bit after that. So floor is open. Please feel free. Mary Jelinek.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've not read your book, and I will read your book.
Mary, excuse me, just 1 minute. When you ask your question or make your comment, would you just say a word about yourself as well, so that we know who's here, and this gives Shawn a sense of who's here. Mary Jelinek, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Mary Jelinek. I represent Pax Christi International at the United Nations here in New York. I'm an attorney by training. I'm familiar with a lot of your writing. I have not read this book, and I really, really am going to plan to read it very soon, because what you've said today has torn me in so many ways. I think that one thing I'm seeing is that even at the United Nations, people are using different vocabularies now, because I think the descriptions of things that have happened in the past that are recurring now have to be described in different ways, because the same old language just doesn't do anything. I heard something, I think maybe it was Mark Seitz from Texas, who said, look at the women who are taking their children out of Latin America, these women of color who are saving their kids, they're saving their families. Here they're denounced as being immigrants. But he said, this is a classic example of nonviolent resistance. This is the prototype of nonviolent resistance. So if we talk about these women as nonviolent resistors, to our Fox friends and neighbors, I wonder whether that change of sort of looking at people differently and making sure we use different language might make a difference. I'm not a Pollyanna. I don't have any, hopes that things are going to change easily. But that to me was a paradigm shift in my own mind. And I find those kinds of things helpful. But thank you for all your scholarship, all your work, all your passion. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful. It's provocative for me in this way to think about migration as nonviolent resistance, because we have a familiarity with, we should have, maybe we've just forgotten it or chosen to forget, because you can choose to forget things. That's the other thing. With migration movement, I mean, Black people left the South in the early 20th century to get away from murders, lynchings, to save their children, meeting the same thing when they got to wherever they were. It was not just down south, it was also up south. So there's a way in which the challenge for us, I think, is to revision really how we encounter any of these women and their children. I mean, this is to me what's so remarkable about Minnesota. There are a number of places that are resisting ICE using either vacant facilities or building facilities to house people who've been detained. And it's working its way. Maryland is resisting. There's places in New Hampshire and Maine and so on. And Canada has really taken to task a particular billionaire who had an empty warehouse in New Hampshire. And they really, the Canadians just did a boycott on anything related to this particular person. Which brought then the ending of this attempt to use this particular place as a detention facility. I think this is, again, I mean, back to Minnesota, to be a neighbor to somebody, but we've lost that with our great thrust toward upward mobility. I mean, nobody knows the people in your apartment building. Nobody, and it's getting back. This is really simplistic. I mean, it's like getting back to basic. It's like being able to say good morning to somebody or hello. I mean, I'm originally from the Midwest, from Michigan, and so sorry, everybody talks about the New England chill. We don't talk. Minnesota people talk, and I think this has stirred people. Really stirred them to move and to react. I think if this is Bishop Seitz, Mark Seitz, I mean, this really is a way to rethink how people are resisting oppression in one place, and how bitterly sad to arrive at oppression in another place because you're trying to stay alive. And so these women are in the famous catch-22 position. They're stuck. And to have someone who would, it's a very complex situation. So I admire Pax Christi, truly. And these Buddhist monks, to me, I have this kind of sort of broken, twisted common sense thing that Buddhists are the most peaceful of all people. So when the Buddhist monks are walking, I'm thinking to myself, wake up, Catholics, wake up, Christians. These people are telling us we should be on the move doing something. We should be walking someplace ourselves, whether it's physically or spiritually or intellectually. I was really moved when I heard that, So it's really, Buddhists are teaching us something, and ordinary people who just, and it's happening everywhere. And we should talk to the people that we encounter. I'll stop after this one little comment. I'm probably talking too much, but there's where I live, Watertown is a very small little town, contiguous to Cambridge, Boston, and Newton. And it was settled by Armenians who came here after the genocide. So a lot of Armenian stuff happens here, and there are a lot of different people. And my cab driver whenever I need to go to the airport, I use my own local cab company. Okay, so local. And super dependable. So Kamal picks me up, and I'm talking to him, and he says to me, Shawn, my sister called me from LA to tell me that they had raided the car wash where she goes. I mean, so like this is all, it may not be happening on my street, but I know streets where it's happening because my people that I'm connected to are telling me about it. I mean, he's telling me that he can't, the woman in his apartment building knocks on his door, says, would you go get gas for my car? Because I can't leave my kids so late at night. I'm afraid if anything happens to me, somebody won't. So we've generated enormous fear. So people who came here to try to make a better life, doing jobs that we don't want to do. We don't want them. So now who's going to do all these? Are all our little automated gadgets going to do this stuff for us? I mean, this is whatever this stuff is. I mean, many years, this is about 10 years ago, the people in California, some people in some orchards tried to get people who were not your quote Latino workforce to pick oranges or grapes or whatever they were growing. And they were charged, they were going to pay $15 an hour. These people lasted like a few hours of the day and they were gone. They were gone. I mean, we don't value hard work. First of all, that's one key thing, because we think if you work with your hands, you must be stupid. We don't think about this. Whoever's migrating here, most of these people who are migrating are not college educated people. And there's nothing smart about being college educated. I mean, it's a fluke of the moment. There were plenty of people smart forever who never went to college. We all know that. I'm not saying anything new to anybody who's in this audience, you know. But it's we've gotten ourselves into such a twisted situation. Such a twisted situation.
Yeah. Shawn, thank you. Lots of good comments there. Lots of food for thought. Mary Jelinek, thanks for the springboard question. Really, we're on to something here in terms of new language and new descriptions and old phenomena repeated
Yeah.
in rhythm.
Yeah.
Let's take somebody else's question, comment. The floor is open.
Dr. Copeland, one of my biggest concerns, especially that's just been
Do you want to say something about yourself?
sorry. My name is Debbie Amatuli. I'm from Virginia. I was a mediator and a licensed professional counselor, and I have a theology degree as well. One of my main concerns is exactly what you're talking about. I think it's extremely important that we not lose the facts of history, we have a system in place now that's erasing history. And we have a system in place that's not at all interested in teaching critical thinking. And my concern is how we can salvage that as much as we can, because if we lose all that, I'm thinking about the kids coming up and the models they're seeing. And, it's, they've built a very good system to take us apart.
Yeah.
And trying to work on that system to build a better system that's not going to take us apart, but can't lose those pieces, because we can't just be right here. We have to do the continuum.
I mean, that's a very important comment. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's about education. I mean, I looked the other day at the New York Times. There was an article on students reporting professors who are referencing gender or sexuality in their classrooms and in their syllabi. And so now they want to post all the syllabi. And so the American Historical Association, I think, was saying that they have certain syllabi for the public and then for the class. Well, that's not really the way to solve it, because the syllabus for the class can easily be copied and disseminated as well. I mean, it doesn't work. But it's sort of thinking that that education can be handled or put constructed, held, limited, because this is another issue, limiting this. The other thing is learning how to be adult with our history, or at least to be mature about it. I don't know, maybe adult is not right. Maybe adult is about something else, and maturity is something else, because there's plenty of immature adults, as you well know. But you have to be able to deal with the facts of your country. It's not perfect. It's really that we are we're living our history continually, because we're living in, this is it. I mean, this is Saidiya Hartman again. We're living in the present that slavery created. I mean, in the sense of stealing land, in the sense of expropriating it, in the sense of wiping out populations, or at least limiting them, of containing them on reservations. I mean, we've done this before. We did this even with a great president. You know, we did this with the Japanese during the Second World War. We interred American citizens. And then we sent people out to their sons went out to the war. So there's we're strange in this way. And this is human strangeness. It's not necessarily American strangeness. We have our own little particularities. But I think education is crucial, and education that also allows us to confront what's negatively happened here, to confront that, but also to figure out how we can live differently. That's how you're not repeating it. That's why I used to tell students. I mean, okay, you're not responsible for what happened in 1695, but you are responsible for today. You're responsible for how you treat people that you encounter today. And if you treat them the way they were treated in 1695, then you're just continuing this negative cycle or negative expression. You're just continuing it. But you can't, because we can change. That's the other point. We can change. We are able.
Great. Let's move to Elizabeth Lee with another question. Elizabeth, go ahead. Unmute. Give us a word about you and then your comment.
I'm Liz, and I'm in Sydney, Australia, on the lands of the Bidjigal people. I'm currently actually in Melbourne at a gender violence conference, and it is coming up to 6 a.m. in the morning, so I'm on my bed.
I'm sorry. But I'm envious also.
What has resonated with me was the line that you said, everything has changed and nothing has changed. And tomorrow we will be acknowledging the anniversary of the apology to the stolen generation of these lands, which we now call Australia. And as I've been listening to you and talking about, it's a human condition. It's not specific to the US. I see it repeated in Australia, particularly what's been going on in our country since the Bondi massacre just a couple of weeks ago. But I'm also reflecting on the biblical tradition and the violence and the stealing of land that is foundational to our biblical texts, that are then the stories that we are uplifting. And nothing has changed, everything's changed and nothing has changed. So I'm just sitting with those words that you shared with us.
You have scholars in Australia who've done a lot of work on this. Really, really good scholars who are trying to understand settler colonialism and the kinds of ways in which that legacy continues for us. Shout out to you. I love Australia. I've been in Australia 4 or 5 times. Yeah, it's a wonderful, lucky country in so many ways. The people are what make any piece of land lucky and wonderful. It's people. And like your origins, like Georgia here in the United States, as a penal colony, sent out for punishment. I mean, there's ways in which there are resonances in your experience, and the ways in which you've tried to really encounter Indigenous people over the long haul. Yeah, I mean, I that's very important. That's very important. One of my first experiences of a land acknowledgement was at a conference in Australia for Catholic secondary school principals, where people were able to simply just do that and do it wonderfully and graciously, and have elders, traditional elders, present there. There's a lot to learn. Nope, there's a lot for us here to learn from other places. But if we keep thinking we're the greatest thing that since sliced bread, we're never going to learn anything, because nobody can teach us anything. We don't do humility well here in the US, unfortunately. Not at all. Although we have a lot to be humble about. But thank you very much. And you're at a conference on gendered violence. That's really that's tough stuff. That's tough stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to bring us to a conclusion here reluctantly, and then keep us going after the break. But several colleagues have had to leave because of 2 o'clock commitments or 6 a.m. commitments. Elizabeth, in your case, maybe. And I must say, I read this morning that with a heavy heart the way in which the demonstration in Sydney, the pro Gaza demonstration, issued in some serious violence on the part of your I suppose your government. And the way it was written here was that the way in which Trump handles things here is being exported as even to Australia, which is really quite shocking. And anyway, just to say that we see you and we know that's going on, and sympathize on that score. Shawn Copeland, you have just shared enormously generously today, and I really am deeply in your debt, and I appreciate it. So with that, I wish everyone a meaningful rest of February, and I wish you strength for the resistance that we all need to engage in. And if it's okay, we'll just keep going for a few minutes in terms of comments and questions. And I'm going to start with the one I kind of prefaced before. I certainly was thrilled by your citing Angela Sims, who describes this neo-lynching phenomenon in your revised chapter 7. But I admit that this chapter is one of the hardest theological texts I have ever read. The pain leaps off the page. The fear of random death that is instilled in Black people by lynching is palpable, and as you say, needs to be named: George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and other names that come to mind. And I noted a version of this in the recent arrest of journalists Don Lemon and Georgia Ford, after judges said that there was no probable cause for crime in their case. They had gone into a church during a demonstration. But the Department of Justice kicked this up to a grand jury. But what I found really singularly horrifying was that it was noted that Mr. Lemon was taken into custody at 11 o'clock at night. He was visiting in California. They didn't even arrest him at home on the East Coast, but he was taken into custody at 11 o'clock at night, so he would have to spend the night in jail before appearing before a judge. Talk about neo-lynching. I just want to reinforce that and say, yes, we need to get this neo-lynching into the vocabulary, Mary Jelinek. We need to talk about this in new ways. Shawn, response?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this idea of new vocabularies. I mean, detaining. I just noticed in the chat, detaining is a soft word. I get that.
Kidnapping.
I don't. Yeah, but it is. That's what it is. It's kidnapping. It's also it's chasing down, and it's another version in a certain way of bounty hunting that we used to talk about in the Old West. I mean, where everything went, or I guess bounty hunters are still around. We can still find people who are looking for people who are on the escape list and who are whatever. I mean, so this kind of I mean, it's all about, all this works is instilling terror, and it's getting people to be afraid. It's getting white people to be afraid to go out. It's getting white journalists to be afraid. Now, Minnesota has a very limited population of people of color. So the people who are risking themselves in this instance are white people. but I'm going back to these old values that people are really clinging to, talking about your neighbor. I mean, old Mr. Rogers, won't you let me be your neighbor? You know, I mean, we can think of all that as sort of namby-pamby and all that, but to try to teach children about neighborliness and respect, how do we do that? So, I mean, those people are showing that right now. They're showing children that you can risk for others, that being a neighbor also means not just baking a pie and carrying it or bringing a bottle of wine or a fruit basket, but also risking your life for others. And I think this is the lesson. I mean, I was a little bit, I mean, misogyny is so real here in the United States. I mean, truly, you think you shot a woman in the face and you went off by calling her some other name in the end. You just walk away. You won't let anybody attend to her wounds, okay? And then and it sort of fades in a way from us. We sort of, because all of us Christians are going like, oh, who was that? And what does that matter? Then we start finding out, oh, she's a mom. Where's the husband? Then we're finding out, oh, she's a lesbian. So suddenly we're sort of fading out on Renee Nicole Good. And as soon as our young male nurse gets shot, I mean, suddenly we're all back in it now. This is what I'm talking about, the distance between Black Lives Matter and Say Her Name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because in my notes after this question, I had exactly that example: white woman, white man, and the difference that it made.
Yeah.
Which is something. Let me just raise another question here too. I know other people have, but I want to raise one more issue, and that is last month, for those who were with us, we had, or want to watch the video, we had Melanie Morrison talking about her book, Becoming Trustworthy White Allies. Duke University Press Book 2025, Melanie Morrison. And she discussed, some of you remember, Deb, you were there, I think, and others remember Melanie's very, very important conversation. She discussed lynching as having a strong component of spectatorship. And you talk about that in your book, too.
Yes.
That white people took their children to view this spectacle, which is sort of the opposite side of what's happening in Minnesota. And she mentioned the publicity of lynching down to the postcards and the newspaper articles. And you mentioned this too.
Yeah.
You make reference to this. And Melanie makes the point that for white children, seeing a lynching was also, in addition to everything else, it was a way of eroding their sense of what's real and good. What child, she said, could ever trust their parents' ethics if they took their children to this blood sport? What child could ever find their own moral compass when this evil beyond imagining, this is my language, is presented as good, when their own nascent sense of life is negated? And she was making the point, very important point, and I think this is happening in Minnesota too, that as we lift up these rhymes of history, thanks to Heather Cox Richardson for the term, but as we lift these things up, we can begin to see how these things have an impact on everybody.
Yes.
That's why she said there's and the mental health issues of young people today. I mean, think about that. Anyway, I just want to add that to the conversation.
Yeah.
People to look at last month's conversation with Melanie Morrison, Becoming Trustworthy White Allies, because she said we're not going to get there. We're not going to become trustworthy white allies. Let's be clear about that. But we can work at it every day of our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think, there's such a there's so much for us to learn. James Allen has this book, Without Sanctuary, which traces the history of lynching. And yes, the postcards, little children, collecting souvenirs for your kid, I mean, all of this. It's the question I had when you made the comment about how could you trust your parents? I mean, well, there are people who thought it was okay. Yeah. There are kids who grew up to think it was all right to do that. This is the problem. I mean, all these people who were in the middle of the civil rights movement, these older, sheriffs and so on, they would have been children in 1910, 1920 when this is going on. So here, you're just doing what your parents did. Mm-hmm. You're just doing what your parents did. And that's the point of there are two things here. Somebody pointed this to me yesterday, that what we also have, and this is a thought, that the civil rights movement was fundamentally a peaceful movement. It was not a violent movement. People provoked violence. They were the subjects or objects, really, of violence. They were the objects of violence. But Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy and all these people were not throwing any bombs at anybody. They were not beating anybody. They were simply, going to a school as a, little child. You were simply sitting on, you were doing things that were nonviolent demonstrations. And I think this is somewhere in someone's psyche, people are expecting violence, and so they want it. And they want people to respond, and people are not responding in violence. And that's the key thing. It's dangerous because you can wind up dead because you're not fighting back. But I think this is a terrible lesson for us. I mean, I don't know if people think that Black people are going to sort of show up now and start killing people. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. This is not going to happen. But what is happening is that we're sowing seeds of violence in lots of young people, this kind of behavior. It's okay to do this. It's okay to call women names. It's okay to assault women. It's okay to grab women. It's okay. I mean, last point is that Howard Thurman opens up his one of his books by talking about his work in Florida. He's raking leaves for somebody or something, and this little white girl comes out and sticks him with a pin, and he cries, and she says, "Oh, I didn't think Black people felt pain." I mean, we're teaching people things. We're teaching over and over again, because medical students who come to Boston hospitals every year have to learn that Black people too feel pain. Every year, at least, or every other year, the Globe writes an article about what they're learning that they didn't know. Think of Serena Williams, who almost died because nobody believed that she could be in pain in childbirth because she was a Black woman and she was an athlete. You don't feel pain. I mean, there are incredible, there's the world that we live in is stunning in its ignorance and in its hostility to whatever is different.
Thank you. All of that is so crucial and so hard. And yet, one thing that you said in this hour, which I'm going to take away, just so we can change. And that's why we do this work, because we can change. We can change other people, but we can change too.
Yes, we can change ourselves.
Yeah, we can change ourselves. Carolyn, you're next. And then time is getting on here, so I want to respect everyone's agenda and next meetings.
Okay.
I'm Carolyn, and I guess I would fall under just interested layperson, and like big fan of your book, Dr. Copeland. And I guess one of my favorite sections is Eucharistic solidarity, and this kind of goes off to like one of the like question of like how do we teach our kids like neighborliness, and I guess how do we convey the extent of that Eucharistic solidarity demands and what Eucharist demands to, I guess, others, but also to ourselves, of how do we convey to ourselves what Eucharist demands.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know any other way except praying and going to Eucharist, I mean, and praying, this is really incredible. I mean, we've been praying every morning for the conversion of Putin, I mean, you look at Ukraine and we've been praying for the conversion of Netanyahu, the conversion of Donald Trump. Just, it's like God, like open people's eyes, hearts, minds, consciences, and actions so that they can do something different. And me too. Let me be different too, I don't know any other way, because I don't know any other way. I mean, you have to do something by way of solidarity that you can do. So if you're at the UN, there's a lot you can do. And it's by way of verbal conversation, interaction, programming, maybe protest. You and I can do this too, Carolyn. I mean, we can protest, we can, pray, we can write, we can email our friends. I mean, there are a lot of, those are small actions, but that's the old butterfly wings, huh? That the butterfly flaps its wings and something happens miles away. I mean, maybe our prayers can make something happen miles away, but you're praying for people's conversion, and I don't know what that conversion looks like. I just hope that it's a change for good. That's all I can say, but it is, this is where it's like you have to have hope. I mean, that's where I think of all these people who lived and died in slavery, who had no other expectation except that, and yet did their utmost best to live a life of hope, to live good. Not everybody. I don't want to be romantic about enslaved people. They weren't all nice, but there were people who did live that way, who did live that way.
Let me, Carolyn, thank you very much for your comment. I flagged that too in the book, the term Eucharistic solidarity, which I thought was a very welcome and lovely term. But I also thought, and I don't mean to draw on another whole set of issues, but it is a double-edged sword for Catholic women.
Yes, it is.
Kept from licit leadership of Eucharistic celebrations. And so the affirmation of Eucharistic solidarity seems to me to point ever more urgently toward rectifying that form of discrimination. And I find the Eucharist in present form co-opted in ways that I wish it were not. Now I'm talking about here in the official, in church circles, not what goes on in basic communities and women church groups and so forth. But I find that I wish it were not, precisely for the reasons that you suggest it's important. And I just wonder if you wanted to draw a connection here between these kinds of issues that especially Catholic women have been working on quite successfully, I'd say, over the last 50 years of avoiding being co-opted by the institutional church and of creating new forms of ministry so that we don't have to replicate the old models. I think we should proclaim this great victory of our 50-year efforts. But at the same time, Eucharistic solidarity, that it would allow us to really be part of communities that live out this sort of thing, would just be so enhancing. I just wonder if, do I struggle with that? You don't? I mean, I don't,
No, I mean, I mean, yes, what I also struggle with is that here we are, we're all insisting on the real presence. And so if you're not doing the real presence, you can't be.
No, you're not doing that.
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah, go back to bed.
So I get really annoyed at that in some ways. And I know that there are plenty, maybe not plenty, but there are priests who sort of they just gloss over that at certain circumstances, out of pastoral concern. And I don't want to mock that, because it gives some people an opportunity to act differently, But I also think I'm trying hard to think about this, and I'm not gonna get this right, but there's a new article in Commonweal that looks at Mary Douglas and her reflection on this recent issue of Commonweal, and her reflection on gender parity in ordination. And I was trying to read it twice because I kept thinking, like, she's saying she's not really necessarily concerned about it. And she's trying to say that there's something that we ought to find a way to help women get involved in commenting on or directing church law in certain areas that we haven't before. But maybe we don't need to do this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay. Am I reading this incorrectly? So I don't know. Look at the recent edition of Commonweal and read it, and because there's a long article. I mean, I'm just sort of thinking, like, wow, this is interesting. I wouldn't think that. I don't know Mary Douglas's whole corpus, so I don't know how she changes or doesn't, or if she does. But it was something that sort of brought me up short, because I think of priesthood as a call. And I don't think that the Holy Spirit is discriminating by gender, race, or class. Because if you did that, I would tell my students, go get another God. Get another God that doesn't discriminate. So I can't do it. I have to say that this is a description. Come on. We go literally through this, but Jesus wasn't a priest. He didn't belong to the tribe of Levi. He was not anybody ordained. He was a simple itinerant Palestinian Jew who really made a big impact on a lot of people. And the lot of people doesn't seem like a lot to us, but it was a lot then. It was enough to make people afraid of him because he was trying to get people to re-examine their social situation in light of their religious positions. And that's what we're all trying to do. Get people to examine our social situation in light of our religious positions. Well, if you're a Christian and you've got the Beatitudes, what does that mean? Does it mean that, okay, do you want to be the meek? No, we don't want to be the meek. We don't want to be the poor. We get the other version. And we manage to leave out all those woes, don't we? Woe to you who are rich, woe to you who are happy now. We manage to just, we're threading the needle so that we can sew our own little piece of cloth that sort of matches our own views. And I think that the whole point of the New Testament is to really shake us all up. I mean, I don't know. I really, it's hard. We've manipulated the Jewishness of Jesus so that he can be now a Zionist or something and be somebody who wants to act in ways that are completely contrary to all that I think the gospel stands for. I mean, he's living a life in which he and the ordinary people around him are all subjugated by the most lethal military force in the ancient world. I mean, we're reading in our parish for our Lenten exercise is Jesus and the Disinherited. And this Howard Thurman's little book. This is the book that Martin Luther King Jr. apparently carried in his briefcase everywhere he went. I mean, it's a reflection on what it means to be disinherited, to be dispossessed, and to understand that Jesus is really a part of that, and that the religion that Jesus tried to practice and teach, his way of being Jewish in the world, was a way of nonviolence, was a way of shared resources, was a way of answering the question, who is my neighbor? I mean, that's the question. And everybody's swarming out of it. The lawyer, when he answers that question, can't even say the word Samaritan. The lawyer has to say the one. I mean, what I'm saying in manipulating Zionism, I mean, we are. There are Christians who are doing this to bring about a kind of sort of Christian nationalism. And I think that that's really this is our Christian fault, because we have not settled we haven't been good. We haven't been good. We have been anti-Semitic. We've been I mean, we don't get it. We don't get it. And we can get it. That's the thing. We can. It's what Lindquist says. It's not knowledge we lack. What's missing is the courage to understand what we know and to draw conclusions.
Well, you have done that today in a brilliant way and in a very informative way and also in a very passionate way. And I want to thank you again. Is there anybody who won't sleep tonight if they don't get to make their comment or ask their question? I don't want to preempt this, but we are well over our time.
Yeah.
We virtually.
I hope Liz got more coffee or went back to bed. It's 6 o'clock there.
I know.
Yeah.
It's Carrie here. Very quickly, I just want to lift up that Howard Thurman where did he get what he had to give us? And I would like to lift up Daytona Beach, Florida.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
would like to just, give praise to God for that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Your own stomping grounds down there in Florida, huh? Virginia Day, did you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to say hello to Dr. Copeland, Virginia Day,
Yes.
STM.
Thank you very much.
Yes, wonderful to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Oh yes, Virginia Day is a stalwart water person. She's now you begin, Shawn, you begin to get the sense of these water people, the Virginia Days of this world. These are talk about the salt of the earth people. Virginia did a brilliant meditation last month on buttons.
Yeah.
Huh.
Buttons.
That's
Like,
great.
your buttons, you button your blouse, your button, and it was, I mean, you absolutely just blew us away with the buttons. It was a magnificent way to start the new year, thinking about buttons. And again, if you go on the Water website, look under meditations and treat yourself to Virginia Day's meditation on buttons.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And particular thanks to you, Shawn. And don't be a stranger. We need you here whenever you want. And if you have a new project you're working on and you want a good critical audience and people who welcome you, truly welcome you and appreciate what you're doing. So I thank you very, very deeply.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for all you're doing and your resistance everywhere and your creativity. It helps us all. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.